So I think the coolest thing I learned yesterday
Yeah.
from Nadine was the why we don't use the word venereal anymore to describe venereal diseases. Like,
Oh my gosh. Like, I know I did it on the talk with her. I just went like mind blown. That was such like I freaking love language. It's so frustrating, but that whole conversation reminded me how much I love language and talking about language, and that we need to have these conversations because words have power.
absolutely. And that language constantly evolves.
Yeah.
So, like, y'all, what we got a chance to do yesterday was have a chat with the great and wonderful Dr. Nadine Thornhill, a friend of the channel, about words around sexuality that we don't use anymore.
Yeah.
In support of our upcoming online training, words we don't say anymore.
Hey, what a title.
And we're going to be coming with a whole bunch of different other offers, and I'm going to drop a link in the chat literally while Erin explains this video. So if you want to join us for the workshop, you are able to.
What video am I explaining?
Yeah, tell them about Nadine coming next week.
Oh, Nadine, yeah. Sorry, I'm with you. I was like, we've got a curling video. I'm here, folks. I'm with it. We still have a corporate retreat hangover this week, all three of us. I know. Yeah, so the conversation with Nadine will be airing live on our YouTubes next Monday. If you miss it, it'll be up for replays. We'll also be sharing it on LinkedIn on Friday. So it's, yes, Jay, we love a Nadine chat too. It's another fantastic chat with Nadine. We could have talked to her for about 85 hours, but we kept it to, I think, around 15 minutes. Where she has 3 words for us, including venereal disease. So you don't want to miss it to hear what else she has to talk about and share with us. And please join us on June 1st for our training on words we don't say anymore. It's a popular topic with a lot of us. The more conversations we have with people from around the world, we learn more about words we don't say anymore. And it's a huge part of the work that we do on our online content for Abby Research. So we're super excited to start doing it.
So very excited. And hopefully one of the cool things, if y'all can join us for that training, would be that we learn more words from you as well. So super excited. So last week on our corporate retreat, what we all learned is that Erin is really good at curling.
I'm not going to go with really good. I'm going to go with I picked it up quickly, and my yoga practice really helped.
So you want to take the mic and explain why we're talking about curling today?
Yeah, so we're talking about curling, one, in part because our beloved third team member, Eleanor, is actually a trained curler and a trained curler trainer. So she used to coach curling as well and played for a good long while. And as a part of our corporate retreat in the Great White North last week, we did a team building activity, as all good retreats do. And learned curling at a local ice sheet where we were in Ontario. And boy, we had so much fun, but we also learned so much, not just about the sport of curling. I am still showing videos to my family and friends of pebbling the ice because it's the craziest, coolest thing we've ever seen. But it also prompted kind of a larger philosophical discussion of like how we understand things that are portrayed to us. And how much more there is below the surface to a lot of things in our lives. So as you know, we like to take events in our lives or pop culture, things that we've seen, and kind of have a little philosophical chat about what this teaches us about human beings. So that's what we're going to do today, because we're not done talking about curling.
No, we're not. But first, we are going to talk about our empathy exercises, and then we'll
Yeah.
launch into exactly why we're talking about curling. So first up is me. I have the first three.
We
And
keep doing that. I don't know why, but it's an interesting pattern that, like, you do the first 3 and then I come in and I'm like, "I've got empathy exercises." Maybe we'll pick a different pattern, but it's hilarious.
I don't know. I found these all last week while we were at Eleanor's watching Our Flag Means Death.
Our
So,
flag is
which
because
we
you're always
also,
doing multiple things at once. That's why you find it.
yeah, I am never doing what, even when I am sleeping, I am somehow also having like a panic attack or something. So anyway, this comes to us from the New York Times, and the headline reads, Attorneys General threaten to investigate the NFL's treatment of female employees. Now, several things. I want to always say, when I say attorneys general, I learned this plural from the West Wing. So thank you, Aaron Sorkin, for teaching me the plural of attorneys general. And second of all, what essentially this is that finally attorneys general are researching what we've all known all along, that the NFL is a terrible place to work if you are not a cishet white man. And it's not great always if you are even that. So 6 states, led by New York's Letitia James, who is their state attorney general. Illinois, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Oregon, and Washington State are all also going to be investigating discrimination, civil discriminations, and such things against women in particular within the corporate NFL culture and the culture of each of the teams within those states. So this could be really interesting, especially because Letitia James does not seem to have like any limits to her fight. Like all of the stuff she goes after, she goes until there is no more evidence. She doesn't seem to give into politics all that often. I don't know anything about the attorneys general of those other states, but I do know Letitia, and so those people not familiar, that means the Chicago Bears, the Seattle Seahawks, the New England Patriots, the Minnesota Vikings, and then Oregon. Is there just like a state? Am I blanking?
Portland?
There's not a team in Oregon, right?
There's not a team in Oregon.
Oh, well,
maybe Oregon's just like jumping on the bandwagon.
Maybe they have employees from it. I don't know. Maybe the NFL has a Western office. There's not a national football team, but there definitely is in those other states. And the state of New York, even though they operate in North Jersey, has both the New York Giants and the New York Jets. So
yeah, and I
they
think
play in
too,
North Jersey.
I don't see it listed in there, but I think whatever the District of Columbia, I would imagine might be, they don't have attorneys general, so maybe it's not the same lawsuit, but a lot of this stemmed from former and current staff members of what is now called the Washington Commanders.
Yeah.
The team, the Washington football team, and a number of women there who spoke out about a particularly terrible culture. So salutes to them. I don't know if they're probably in some other litigation because DC doesn't have an attorney general, but that I think is where a lot of this is coming from, is from those women. So we like to see it.
We love to see opportunities for minorities to regain their power and to retain recognition, which leads us to the Represent Asian project lets us know that this year's Grammys was particularly positive for Filipino Americans. Bruno Mars of Silk Sonic, Olivia Rodrigo, Saweetie, Her, Ellie King are all Filipino artists. They were nominated for a total of 22 Grammys and took home 8 of them. I know I was particularly unaware that Olivia Rodrigo was a Filipino American, so I'm glad to know that. I did know that about Bruno Mars. But I'm really, really excited. So we want to thank the Represent Asian Project on Instagram for drawing this to our attention. Really excited about that prospect. About that statistic. Also, things we're excited about. We would like to shout out the small state of San Marino, which is a European principality, and they have appointed the very first world's openly gay head of state. Paolo Rondelli was named one of 2 captains regent in the country making strides on gay rights. I love that captain's regent. I know nothing about San Marino. They have not popped up on Colonizers World Tour.
They're fascinating. There's 2 like principalities. There's 2 states within Italy, like within the bounds of Italy. San Marino is one, and the Vatican is another. But Paolo is one of my favorite Italian names. So way to go, Paolo.
Erin's super excited. So this is positive social media news, and on to negative social media news.
Yeah, you're welcome, everybody. So this came across my newsfeed last week that there was an active investigation from the Center for Countering Digital Hate, which I was last week years old that I learned that existed. Reportedly analyzed over 8,000 direct messages sent to 5 participants who have a combined following of 4.8 million on the Instagram platform to look at the rate which Instagram responded to the abusive messages. So they weren't even looking to determine if there were abusive messages. They were just saying like, well, there's abusive messages, but we're looking at Instagram's response. So it was the direct messages to Amber Heard, who we know is an actress and a UN human rights champion, Rachel Riley, a British daytime television presenter, Jamie Klinger, a founder of the activist group Reclaim the Streets, Brian E. Gordon, a journalist and mental health campaigner, and Sharon Dhaliwal,
I would say.
Dhaliwal, the founder of South Asian culture magazine Burnt Roti. So researchers found that 1 in 15 of the direct messages sent to these participants broke Instagram's rule of abuse and harassment. So
the next sentence is my favorite.
Yeah. Instagram failed to act on 90% of abusive messages. 90%. 1 in 15 of like 8,700 DMs violated their policy, and they investigated and failed. They acted and investigated on 10% of those. So, this isn't a great audit for Instagram, let's be honest.
Not a good look for Meta.
Not a good look for them. And the quote from the CCDH founder and CEO Imran Ahmed said, "This puts some numbers around something that we all know, which is the power dynamics of social media. These have been turned into digital dark alleys that people feel uncomfortable going into. I don't look at my own DMs for the same reason, but they're just horrible places to be." So, we talk about the cultures that are created around ideas and spaces, and there's certainly a culture, an online culture of abuse and harassment. So sorry that I didn't have a happier empathy exercise, but it's important to know that these things are happening, and also that there's a place that you can go to maybe get some research done or advocate for change.
Speaking of advocating for change.
Hey, I was going to say that. I'm getting so much better at the transitions. In my head, I was like, speaking of advocating for change. So I was yesterday years old when I learned that there is going to be a strike starting yesterday for this entire week for Etsy sellers because of changes that Etsy has made in the way the sellers are charged for things, in a lot of things. And so they're going on strike for the full week to hopefully convince Etsy to pull back some of these changes. So the 5 changes the sellers want to see are scrapping the transaction fee increase, which often goes to the seller, not the buyer, ending the star seller program, which just sounds silly, a transparent plan to crack down on resellers, getting faster support service, and the option to opt out of offsite ads. So, we're having a conversation a lot in the United States about workers' rights, and we're seeing strikes at Amazon and Starbucks and the formation of unions again, because apparently we need to go back to this period in our history where workers are uniting in order to fight for, rights. So this article is really good from the Skim. Obviously, they've skimmed it. There's a petition you can sign. Check out the sellers' websites if you really want to buy something. A lot of them have their own websites that you can buy directly from, or email them if you want to buy something so that you avoid buying things on Etsy. So we send our solidarity to the Etsy sellers. Dr. Kristen and I are both big buyers on Etsy because we love to buy from local humans or non-local humans who are making crafty things for our loved ones. So we stand in solidarity with them, and we hope Etsy has a good listen.
Absolutely. I could not imagine my life without Etsy, actually.
I
So I
know.
hope I don't have to.
Please don't take it away. Please, Etsy.
Please, Etsy. All right, let's crack on with our main topic. But I'll say now that we have found, thanks to our Canadian correspondent, a really lovely explanation of the sport of curling, which we're going to play for you now, because in order to understand anything we're talking about, you need to understand curling.
Curling, the game with the ice and the rocks and the sweeping and the yelling. Each game starts with a handshake and a coin flip to determine who goes first. Then, 2 teams of 4 people take turns throwing 44-pound stones down a sheet of ice. The target? A 12-foot house that looks like a bullseye, just under 150 feet away. Each team throws 8 rocks, and the team closest to the center after all the rocks are thrown will score the points. This process is repeated for 6 to 10 rounds, called ends, until one team is victorious. It's just that simple. Or is it? Each team has a captain called the skip. Like a general on the battlefield, the skip calls the shots that will best ensure victory. Stones are delivered with a predetermined rotation, so they actually curl as they travel down the ice. Of course, this is why the sport is called curling. Over the course of each end, players can throw guards to block the house, draws to try to score, or takeouts to remove the opponent's stones. The skips then spend the rest of the time yelling like a crazy person. What they're actually doing is emphatically advising their players to brush the ice in front of the stone. Brushing can drastically affect the speed and direction of the shot. After each team throws its 8 shots, the team closest to the center of the house will score. Or, if they have more than 1 rock closer than the opposition, they count as well. Once all the ends have been played, whoever has the most points wins. Aside from a few dozen other minor details, that's all there is to it. Find a curling facility near you and get started.
We want to thank the World Curling Federation and the Canadian Curling Federation for putting together that absolutely wonderful video.
It's
explaining
amazing.
The delight that is curling.
I know, and we ran it by Eleanor, and she approved it as well. So this has been like double vetted that we're showing this to you. But yeah, I don't know where I want to start, except for the fact that I had no idea the curling sheet was 150 feet long until I stepped in front of one. So I think that was our first lesson, that like things are harder than they appear. Where
I kind of want to start is my story of curling. Because I'd like to talk about how I thought I was totally wrong.
Go for it.
So I first started watching curling at the 2010 Winter Olympic Games, when we were all preparing to go to India, and my friend Dustin got really into curling. And I remember there was a team meeting at my house, and we all watched curling. And my first thought was, that looks insanely simple. How is this an Olympic sport? Do you even need to be an athlete? And I got super, super judgy. And then I didn't watch it in 2014 because I was actually getting married during the Sochi Games. But I watched it, in 2018. My husband got super into it this year, like super duper into it. And it was, it was fun. Like, it was fun. And then this year I started realizing like how difficult it was. But I still had no true appreciation for the sport until I walked out on that sheet and tried myself. Because let me tell you, you do have to be an athlete. It is really hard. And even outside of it being really hard, the ice never behaves how you want it to behave. I also thought it was just like ice skating ice. So I was like, what is this such a big deal? And then we learned about pebbling. And like my mind was the mind blown emoji for the entire day. And I was schooled and shamed for my previous judgment of curlers.
Ooh, shamed. We don't want a space for shame here. You unlearned what you thought you knew. Let's phrase it that way. We don't hold space for shame, guilt, and
True,
shame.
but I wanted to name the emotion I felt.
Okay, fair enough. I did not feel shame. I felt surprise because I was like, I was not super judgy of curlers. I wasn't super into curling prior to this. I think the most I watched it was when I was at your house during the Olympics, and like every night we came home from work and your husband was like, "Is there curling on? Can we watch curling?" I did not find it, for me, usually if I find something inaccessible, then like I don't sometimes I won't make the effort. I was too tired to like make the effort to learn curling, so I just kind of like ignored it. But it is way more complicated than I thought it was. And so I think that was such a great reminder that like things aren't always what they seem. And especially on television, things are edited. I know it sounds silly to think that like that was a lesson that we learned, but that for me was like the size of the curling sheet. I was like, they must cut the footage. So they show throwing the rock and then they show it crossing the hog line and going into the house. And like, they don't show you the 75 feet in between the two. And I was like, but that makes it really hard. If you want people to know the sport, like why would I could barely see you sometimes at the other end of the sheet. For those of you curious, Dr. Kristen was the skip, obviously, because she is the general on the battlefield. Cough, cough, Hamilton. So she was directing Jay and I's and Eleanor's rocks, but I was like, how do I determine when I let go and what kind of angle I curl the rock at and what the speed is? And then the ice is so unpredictable that it was really just like, yeah, I was the mind blown emoji for the entire 2 hours. I was like, what is this sport and why don't we talk about it all the time?
And one of the things I deeply appreciated too is that like this is baked into a culture, but even like, I mean, Nadine joked that we're now more Canadian than she is because she's never gone curling, but it's also a good reminder that it was baked into certain families and like certain subcultures. Like Eleanor grew up in a curling club, and that was a huge, and listening to like her kind of defense as to why kids should grow up in curling clubs. You know, it's multi-generational. There's really clear, it's low stakes in some ways. The kid doesn't have to be active the whole time. They can choose which of the 3 roles within a curling team they like and really focus on that. There's a lot of those kind of things. And it reminded me again of all around the world, all of these tiny little sports and tiny little cultures and tiny little activities. Like I have a friend whose family was super into puzzling growing up. And now like her absolute favorite, like her best way to unwind is doing a jigsaw puzzle. My least favorite way to spend any moment of my day ever is a jigsaw puzzle. But it's so comforting to her. And it was this great reminder that there's these pockets of humanity that if we aren't literate in their joy, we kind of miss out. And like you and I had this great opportunity and this great guide. And then, you know, someone who was game to enter, to gatekeep us into her world, to showcase her world. And we could just get really curious and be like, tell us about why you love this. And then she was also, if anyone caught the Instagram lives, like Eleanor gave us a full safety demonstration and like was very, very, very wonderful about it and very patient with us. But the whole day I just kept thinking like, this is a lot of people's entire world. And I had never heard of it until I was in my 20s.
Yeah. And I think, you know, you brought up, as you were talking, I thought, you know, you can't have this experience or experiences like this if you aren't curious about yourself and others. And then you use the word curiosity. And for me, it's like, that's the beauty of being curious, is you get to discover these things. And it was such a good reminder that like we limit ourselves when we fill in information that we don't have, or we limit our curiosity when we're like, when I was like, oh, that seems too complicated for me to understand. There's lots of ways I could have found someone before we knew Eleanor that would have explained it, or, you know, a blog article, or that, I mean, if I could have just asked Google and found that delightful video. But you really do limit yourself when you don't practice that curiosity, and you can uncover all these interesting things about yourself. I learned that I love curling. But we learned that not learned, but we had reiterated that Kristen is a very good strategist, and found another way in which she can tap into that strategy, which she doesn't always get to do. So that was really cool for me as her best friend and business partner, to see her get to flex that strategy muscle, because I am not a strategist. And I was like, no, I don't want to be that. And Kristen was like, I want to be the skip. And she had an absolute blast trying to help us navigate that blessed pebbled frozen water.
Yeah, because what was so weird is that, like, what I loved knowing is that it's so many pieces of information. Because I think that's the thing too. You don't love a ton of input, and I need a ton of input.
Yeah.
So I loved being able to try to figure out, like, okay, here are your 3 strengths. Here is how the ice is playing. Here's how much I actually think you have the speed to get it down the ice, and like all of these things. As I thought, like, okay, I would give all 3 of you the same shot, and all 3 of you would take it different ways.
That was so fun when we did that. We were like, let's just see what happens.
Let's see what happens. And so I was thinking, I was like, if we were an actual curling team, like that would be the beginning of practice every time for me. I would just be like, hey, everybody try to hit this. And then I would see how you do it. And I would see what the ice is doing. And then I could make better decisions. But like, oh my God, I did. And it was so much fun trying to read all of those factors that I absolutely did not realize. Like, they kept yelling back and forth to each other. And I was like, why is there this much talking? Well, because I didn't realize that the ice changes literally every single throw of the rock. And, because some of it melts and some of it doesn't. And some of it, and it was like, oh my God, this is wild.
Yeah. And I think too, like, all for being a skip is so much about like gathering data. And that's, the phrase that you keep saying all the time, that I will repeat because you're the one that comes up with our phrases, is like, ask more questions, make less assumptions. I think you and I both made a lot of assumptions about curling based on what we had seen on the Olympics. And then, we unlearned a lot, and we relearned things from a different perspective. But we gathered a lot of data too. And, and then we found out from Eleanor that, like, you really can't learn a lot about curling from watching the Olympics, because the commentators aren't as good as watching, maybe like Canadian curling competitions. So we will be doing more of that as we continue to, follow our interest with the sport. But I think, for me, it was such an emblematic experience of like, we learn by doing and putting into practice all of the things that we teach as empathy educators, which we do a lot in little ways. But this one was just like all of them. It was like all the things we say about empathy and curiosity and assumptions was like into the whole shebang, and wrapped in a nice, neat little bow, and accompanied by Timbits.
Yeah, we did learn that Timbits are a mandatory part of curling, and any sport that comes with donuts, I can 100% get behind.
Post-game celebratory Timbits.
Done.
Genius.
Yeah, we need to make that happen a whole lot more in our lives. Yeah. I'm already like counting down the days until I'm in proximity to a Timmy's again, so I can get some more Timbits. I know,
because where did we find one?
Columbus.
Yeah, I know. I'm gonna like Google Timmy's locations so I can like find out where we will be next closest to a Tim Hortons.
Yeah, especially because today I found out that my local Krispy Kreme is closed forever.
Sad panda.
And it was like a slight death to my soul.
But where will I get my donuts?
Listen, I have a real strong relationship with donuts, and
I know
it's really important to my life. But overall, I think the lesson that I would hope that you guys can learn from us talking about curling is that everything is more complicated than it seems, because we didn't even get to really like the process of how they make the ice and how the ice is precious to the ice makers and all of those kind of things. Everything is more complicated than it seemed. And just like Aaron's brother said on his Welcome to My World, everybody is a nerd about something.
Yeah.
And so find the thing you're curious about, find who's a nerd about it.
Find the nerds. Yeah.
Find the nerds and start asking some questions, because your life will become richer like ours did. And now we have to figure out how to stream the CBC from the United States. So, We are so excited about that. Anything else you want to say about curling and curiosity?
No, I think we've covered it. And I would just like to add, Jay, who lives in Ottawa. Cool. I'd be sad if I didn't have Timbits and donuts either. Yeah, I know, but you get it all the time.
But you rub it in.
Thanks. I'd be sad if I didn't have it. Okay.
Okay, Jay.
Okay.
Although she is suffering a shortage of her favorite Timbit. So I will.
Oh, 'tis true. Yeah, that is quite sad.
Yeah, there is a shortage of the powdered with raspberry inside. So
I know I've never had one because we had one in that Timbits box, and obviously it went to
Jay.
It went to Jay because she's been so deficient. But get on it, Tim Hortons. Jay needs those. She needs them.
And honestly, also something else that is needed around here is a break. And so we're taking one next week. Aaron and I will be traveling to Charleston, and it's not a time in which we're going to be able to pre-record anything for you guys. And honestly, we've had so much to say about the slap and the Oscars and all of this other stuff. We want to reset our brains a little bit to come back and kind of have a fresh conversation after our week in Charleston. So we will sign off here for 2 weeks, and we'll see you again in the last week of April. And we'd love to remind you again to head to the link that is in the chat, and we'll put it in the downstairs. That will take you to our Words We Don't Say Anymore training, so you can join us on June 1st and learn all about the things we don't say anymore, like namaste all day, or why pronouns are so important and all the variations of them and all of those things. We'd love to be able to have that conversation with you. In the meantime, our hope for you is that you find the nerds, that you learn something new and joyful in our 2 weeks apart, and we'd love to hear about it when we see you again. Bye, everybody.
Take care, everybody.